A producer who's become quite prolific in the superhero movie space is Avi Arad. He has been involved in several Marvel movies since the late 90s while producing other major blockbusters as well, although his association with Marvel began well before Spider-Man and the X-Men swung onto the big screen. Arad got his start signing toys and eventually got a job with the company Toy Biz. At the time, Toy Biz had struck a deal with Marvel Comics to produce toys based on their superheroes, with Arad put in charge of handling that. Fortunately, he was already a fan of the characters, having read and loved the comic books back in his native Israel. Shortly after that, Marvel acquired a 46% stake in Toy Biz, and Arad was promoted to president and CEO of Marvel's entertainment division, overseeing development of movies and shows based on the characters. Thus, he served as an executive producer on the X-Men animated series, which was an instant hit when it premiered on the Fox Kids block. Over the next few years, he will be involved in several more animated shows based on the Marvel Comics, including Iron Man, Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, and the Incredible Hulk. He also had aspirations to make movies with those properties, something Marvel had long struggled with. Characters like Black Panther and Spider-Man were licensed to various studios, but would be stuck in development, partly because Marvel insisted on still having a say in the scripts. Roger Corman did produce a Fantastic Four movie, but Arad would buy it and not release it, as he had bigger ambitions for the Marvel superheroes. Marvel itself would go through some financial difficulties and filed for bankruptcy in 1996. To save the company from falling under, Toy Biz merged with Marvel in June 1998, and a few months later, Blade was released by New Line Cinema, with Avi Arad receiving an executive producer credit. The movie was very successful and showed there was potential in even the lesser-known Marvel characters headlining a major blockbuster. He would help with the development of several Marvel movies, and would be involved in trying to convince studios to produce them. Next came X-Men, which 20th Century Fox had already purchased the film rights 2 years earlier after the success of the animated series. This was another hit, further solidifying the widespread appeal of the Marvel superheroes among people of all ages. As I said before, Spider-Man was a character that went through several studios, but they would struggle to figure out a way to bring him to the big screen. Even James Cameron famously took a crack at one point. Shortly after Marvel emerged from bankruptcy, Sony bought the film rights and work immediately began, with Sam Raimi eventually hired to direct. Spider-Man would become the first movie to make over $100 million at the North American box office on its opening weekend, and would continue to bring in plenty of viewers over the next few months. Blade, X-Men, and Spider-Man would all receive sequels, but not every Marvel movie would find favor with audiences. Daredevil would bounce around a couple of studios, with even Disney considering it at one point. When the movie was eventually released by Fox in 2003, it was not particularly well liked, and its gross was considered underwhelming, so a sequel never happened. Avi Arad had been working on an Incredible Hulk movie for several years at Universal, but when the movie opened in 2003, people were perplexed by Ang Lee's directing choices, and despite a strong opening weekend, the film would drop considerably after that and lost money in its theatrical run. In 2000, Marvel licensed the film rights to several Marvel characters to Artists and Entertainment, but the only theatrical film they ended up making was The Punisher, which did not do much business. Then there was the Daredevil spin-off movie Elektra, which was widely disliked and flopped at the box office. The Fantastic Four movie, released by 20th Century Fox in 2005, did do solid business and led to a sequel, even if reviews were largely negative. Elsewhere at Marvel, Chief Operating Officer David Maisel felt the company was leaving money on the table by licensing the film rights to studios instead of producing the films themselves. So he convinced the board to let him raise money for Marvel to set this up, and began working with a young executive named Kevin Feige to figure out how to make a shared cinematic universe with the characters they could still use. These involved the likes of Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, Nick Fury, and other members of the Avengers team. In 2006, Avi Arad decided to leave his role as CEO and become an independent producer, although still retaining some involvement with the Marvel characters. He has never gone into detail why he decided to leave, but according to Arad in an interview years later, he felt there were now too many people he had to answer to at Marvel, a far cry from his early years at Toy Biz and running Marvel films. He would receive a producer credit on the first two MCU movies, Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk, but he would be primarily involved with the Spider-Man movies at Sony. That included Spider-Man 3, where he suggested that Venom be one of the villains. In addition to being one of his favorite Spider-Man antagonists, he also recognized his popularity with fans, and despite Sam Raimi's initial misgivings, the character was included in the film. However, many felt the movie included too many villains for Peter Parker to fight, with Raimi himself later expressing disappointment in how it turned out. Arad would later say that his desire for Venom to be included was probably not the right move, and he should have respected Raimi's disinterest in using him. With Arad no longer at Marvel, that also meant he was able to produce other films not involving superheroes. One of his first was a movie based on the Bratz toy line, so kind of harkening back to how he first entered the business. However, the film was widely panned and performed poorly. He also produced a movie based on the Robo-Sapien robot toy, which was filmed in 2008 but did not get a release until 2013, and a largely minuscule one at that. If you look at a lot of Avi Arad's productions, they have a habit of spending several years in development as they go through multiple directors and script drafts. He became interested in producing a live-action version of Ghost in the Shell, bringing the project to Steven Spielberg, and it was officially announced in 2008. However, it took a long time to reach screens, eventually arriving in 2017 to underwhelming reviews and a disappointing box office gross. Another project that would take about a decade was Venom, which Arad had enthusiastically announced as being in the works shortly after Spider-Man 3 opened, while there were discussions about giving the alien symbiote his own movie as far back as the 90s. Arad would often talk about the film in interviews, as many script drafts from multiple writers would make their way across his desk, with names like future Deadpool writers Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick, and Pleasantville director Gary Ross putting their input in. Eventually, Sony decided they wanted to make movies centered on Spider-Man villains they owned the rights to, while Spidey was off hanging out in the MCU, and the movie would finally open in 2018. While the critical response was largely negative, audiences were more receptive, and it was a huge hit. It led to 2 sequels, along with other Spider-Man adjacent films. Arad was producer on Morbius and Kraven the Hunter, but not Madam Web, which was handled by a different production team than the other movies. Unlike the Venom movies, those films would end up major financial disappointments as well as laughingstocks, and Sony is no longer making these Spider-Man villain movies. More critically acclaimed and adored have been the animated Spider-Verse movies. While Phil Lord and Chris Miller are the principal producers on those, they have said that Arad is also involved and has provided his own helpful notes and suggestions. A pivotal one was during the development of the second film, Across the Spider-Verse. He suggested that the Spot could be the next villain Miles Morales could face off against, which initially befuddled Lord and Miller, since the Spot is widely considered one of the silliest members of Spider-Man's rogues gallery. However, Arad convinced them that he's more powerful than he initially appears. With this in mind, the Spot would evolve into an actual threat and one of the most popular parts of the sequel. Regarding the recent live-action Spider-Man movies like Homecoming and No Way Home, while he does have executive producer credits on those, he reportedly does not have much creative involvement in them. Avi Arad has additionally tried his hand at producing film adaptations of video games. In 2008, he became involved in an Uncharted movie, and this would be yet another project of his that will go through many iterations and filmmakers. So many directors, including David O. Russell, Seth Gordon, Dan Trachtenberg, Sean Levy, and Travis Knight, became attached for a while before dropping out, with Venom director Ruben Fleischer eventually becoming the one to finally direct the film, which was released in 2022. Uncharted was in the works for so long that Mark Wahlberg went from originally playing Nathan Drake to taking on the role of Sully when cameras started rolling. Even though reviews were mixed, the film was a big hit, and the sequel was immediately announced. However, with Tom Holland's currently packed schedule, it's uncertain when it will be filmed. Avi Arad was also producer on the film adaptation of Borderlands, which had its own tricky path to the screen. The script went through several writers, with Eli Roth directing the film. 2 years after principal photography, the movie went through reshoots, but with Tim Miller handling those, as Roth was busy directing Thanksgiving. When the movie was finally released after 3 years in the editing room, it was widely panned and a massive box office flop, meaning there would likely not be any sequels. Despite some occasional setbacks, Avi Arad remains an in-demand producer, as he's known for being very persuasive and enthusiastic. In November 2023, it was announced he'll be partnering with Nintendo on a live-action Legend of Zelda movie, with Wes Ball attached as director and Sony distributing. After the humongous success of the animated Super Mario Bros. Movie, I was surprised that Nintendo decided to make Zelda in live action, but like on that movie, Shigeru Miyamoto has the freedom to pull the plug at any moment if he feels it's not working. Arad is also producing a live-action adaptation of another Japanese property, Naruto, which was initially announced in 2015 with Lionsgate as the film's distributor. The Greatest Showman director Michael Gracie was originally attached, but he dropped out, and Destin Daniel Cretton is now signed on. However, Cretton is also attached to the next Spider-Man movie with Tom Holland, so Naruto might end up another Arad production that takes a while to get off the ground. Despite the occasional hiccups in his career, Avi Arad has still proven himself a producer with passion for the characters he seeks to adapt into movies, and he does deserve some credit for helping to make it possible for the Marvel superheroes to thrive on the big screen. He would even receive a special acknowledgement in the credits of Spider-Man No Way Home for his role in that. He has certainly managed to make a name for himself with his role in some very successful comic book movies and other productions. See you next time.